Picture this: May 1989. A man sits in shadow, his voice disguised, his identity hidden. What he's about to reveal will change everything we thought we knew about Area 51. He claims he reverse-engineered flying saucers powered by an element that didn't officially exist. The government says he's lying. Believers say he's a hero. Skeptics call him a fraud. But here's what's strange. Decades later, some of his impossible claims are starting to come true. Before we begin tonight's journey, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy exploring mysteries with us. And I'd love to know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see listeners joining from every corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture a quiet evening in May 1989. The desert wind whispers across the Nevada landscape. In Las Vegas, a local television station prepares for what seems like another routine interview. But the man sitting in shadow will change everything the world thinks it knows about Area 51. His face is obscured, his voice distorted. He goes by the name Dennis. What he's about to reveal will ignite decades of speculation, government denials, and endless questions about what truly lies hidden in America's most secret military base. This is the story of Bob Lazar, the physicist who claimed he reverse-engineered alien spacecraft, the whistleblower who put Area 51 on the map, the man whose testimony remains as controversial today as it was over 30 years ago. Some call him a hero who risked everything to bring truth to light. Others brand him an elaborate hoaxer who fabricated one of the most enduring UFO myths of our time. Government officials insist his claims are fiction. Believers point to the consistency of his story across decades. What do we really know about Bob Lazar? What drove him to speak out? And why, after all these years, do his revelations continue to captivate minds worldwide? The Nevada desert keeps its secrets well. Vast expanses of emptiness stretch toward horizons that seem to go on forever. But somewhere in that wilderness, beyond the mountains and dry lake beds, lies a facility so classified that it officially didn't exist for decades. Area 51, Groom Lake, Dreamland. It was here, according to Lazar, that the impossible became reality, where technology from another world was studied, dissected, and slowly understood by human minds, where the future of propulsion, of space travel, of everything we thought we knew about physics, was being quietly rewritten. The story begins not in the desert, but in the mind of a curious scientist, a man fascinated by the outer limits of physics and engineering, someone who would soon find himself at the center of the most extraordinary conspiracy theory of the modern age. But before we dive into underground hangars and exotic propulsion systems, we need to understand the world that created this moment, the Cold War tensions, the space race, the growing awareness that we might not be alone in the universe. As you settle in for this journey, imagine the desert night, stars scattered across black sky like diamonds on velvet. Somewhere in the distance, lights move in patterns that defy explanation. This is where our story unfolds, in the space between the known and unknowable, between skepticism and wonder. Robert Scott Lazar entered the world in 1959, born into an America obsessed with the future. The space race was heating up. Science fiction was becoming science fact. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, things were happening that the public would never know about, at least not yet. Growing up, Lazar displayed the kind of restless intellect that finds conventional education limiting. He was drawn to hands-on experiments, to building things, to understanding how the world worked at its most fundamental level. Friends and family would later describe him as brilliant but impatient with bureaucracy. His path through higher education remains one of the most contentious aspects of his story. Lazar claimed degrees in physics from MIT and electronics from Caltech, credentials that would later vanish from official records like smoke in the desert wind. Supporters argue this erasure was government retaliation. Skeptics point to it as evidence of fabrication. What we know for certain is that by the early 1980s, Lazar was living in Los Alamos, New Mexico. The town itself is synonymous with secrets, birthplace of the atomic bomb, home to one of America's premier national laboratories. It's a place where the line between classified research and public knowledge blurs into gray uncertainty. Lazar's time at Los Alamos is documented. A 1982 newspaper article features him discussing his jet-powered car, describing him as a physicist at the Los Alamos Mason Physics Facility. The phone book from that year lists his name among the laboratory's scientists and technicians. Yet Los Alamos officials later claimed no record of his employment. The contradiction is telling. Either records were altered, or the truth is more complex than either side admits. This pattern, verifiable traces followed by institutional denial, would define much of Lazar's story. But perhaps the most important detail from this period isn't found in any official document. It's something more personal, more human. Lazar was restless. The work at Los Alamos, whatever its true nature, wasn't enough to satisfy his curiosity about the frontiers of physics. He had heard rumors, whispers in laboratory hallways about projects beyond the mainstream. Stories told over drinks about research that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. Some spoke of propulsion systems that defied conventional understanding. Others mentioned materials that didn't appear on any periodic table. These weren't the ravings of conspiracy theorists. These were conversations between educated, security-cleared professionals. People who knew the difference between speculation and classified reality. Lazar listened. He made contacts. He began to position himself as someone willing to work on the kind of projects that required both brilliance and absolute secrecy. The move from Los Alamos to Las Vegas in the mid-1980s marked a turning point. Las Vegas in those days was experiencing tremendous growth, but it was still very much a frontier town, a place where ambitious people went to reinvent themselves, where questions about your past were less important than your potential contributions to the future. Lazar established himself in the desert community. He continued his fascination with exotic propulsion, building jet-powered vehicles that caught local media attention. But more importantly, he was making connections, meeting people who moved in the shadowy world between legitimate research and classified government projects. The desert has always attracted dreamers and visionaries, people who see vast empty spaces as canvases for impossible projects. In the 1980s, those empty spaces also attracted the attention of government agencies looking for isolation and secrecy. Area 51 was expanding its operations. The facility, officially known as Groom Lake, had been testing experimental aircraft for decades. The U-2 spy plane had flown its first missions from those runways. The SR-71 Blackbird had pushed the boundaries of speed and altitude above those desert mountains. But according to later testimony, something else was happening there too. Something that required a different kind of expertise. Scientists who could think beyond the constraints of conventional physics. Engineers willing to reverse engineer technology that might not be of terrestrial origin. The stage was being set for an encounter that would change everything. A brilliant, ambitious scientist looking for the ultimate challenge. A government project requiring absolute secrecy and unprecedented scientific insight. And somewhere in the Nevada desert, technology waiting to be understood. By the late 1980s, these elements were converging. Lazar's reputation for innovative thinking was growing. His willingness to work on unconventional projects was noted. And the mysterious facility at Groom Lake was about to need someone with his particular combination of skills and discretion. The official story says none of this ever happened, that Lazar was never employed at any secret facility, that his claims are the product of an active imagination or a calculated deception. But the seeds of what would become the most famous UFO testimony in history were already taking root in the Nevada desert. The phone call came on an ordinary Tuesday in December 1988, or at least that's how Bob Lazar remembers it. A voice on the other end, professional but cautious, mentioned his background at Los Alamos, asked if he might be interested in a consulting opportunity. something requiring his expertise in physics, particularly propulsion systems. The conversation was brief, vague, the kind of preliminary contact that serious researchers receive regularly. But something about this call felt different. There was an undercurrent of significance, a suggestion that this wasn't just another government contract. Details were sparse. He was told the work would be classified, that security clearances would be required, that the location was remote, somewhere in the Nevada test site area. If he was interested, arrangements could be made for an interview. Lazar was intrigued. The Nevada test site encompassed vast areas of desert, much of it off-limits to the public. Officially, it was used for nuclear testing and related research. But insiders knew it also hosted other projects: aerospace research, weapons development, experimental technologies that pushed the boundaries of known science. The interview process, when it began, felt both routine and unusual. Standard forms to fill out, background checks that seemed more thorough than typical, questions about his willingness to work on projects that might challenge conventional scientific understanding. But there were also hints of something extraordinary, references to propulsion systems unlike anything in current use, mentions of materials with properties that didn't match known physics, the suggestion that he might be working with technology that was unprecedented. According to Lazar's later testimony, his interviewer was Dr. Edward Teller, the renowned physicist known as the father of the hydrogen bomb. Teller supposedly remembered meeting Lazar at a Los Alamos lecture, where the younger scientist had impressed him with insightful questions about advanced propulsion concepts. The meeting took place at McCarran Airport in Las Vegas, neutral ground, public enough to seem ordinary, private enough for sensitive conversation. Teller, if it was indeed him, asked probing questions about Lazar's theoretical understanding of gravity and electromagnetism. More importantly, he explored Lazar's willingness to think beyond established scientific paradigms. Could he examine technology that might operate on principles not yet understood by mainstream physics? Was he prepared to analyze systems that might challenge fundamental assumptions about how the universe worked? Lazar said yes. The compensation was attractive, but more than that, the intellectual challenge was irresistible. Here was an opportunity to work on the absolute cutting edge of scientific understanding, to be part of research that could revolutionize human technology. The security briefing came next, papers to sign acknowledging the classified nature of the work, warnings about the serious legal consequences of unauthorized disclosure, reminders that national security could depend on maintaining absolute secrecy. But along with the standard warnings came more unusual instructions. He was told that the worksite was unlike typical government facilities, that he should prepare mentally for concepts and technologies that might seem impossible at first glance, that open-mindedness would be essential. The transportation arrangements were deliberately mysterious. He would fly from McCarran to a remote airstrip. From there, ground transport to the actual worksite. The flight itself would be unmarked, unofficial, as if it never happened. Lazar's first glimpse of the facility came from the air. Below him, the Nevada desert stretched endlessly, broken only by mountains and the occasional dry lake bed. Then, suddenly, a complex of buildings and runways appeared. This was Groom Lake, Area 51, though he wouldn't learn that designation until later. But Area 51 wasn't his final destination. After landing at Groom Lake, he was transferred to a bus with windows that had been painted black. Another journey through the desert, this time unable to see where he was going. The bus ride took about 30 minutes, winding through what felt like mountainous terrain. When the bus finally stopped, Lazar found himself at a facility unlike anything he had ever seen. Built into the side of a mountain, camouflaged to blend with the natural landscape. This was S4, a name he would later reveal to the world, though at the time it was simply the site where his real work would begin. The briefing that followed challenged everything Lazar thought he knew about physics, technology, and humanity's place in the universe. Documents that spoke of contact with non-human intelligence, technologies that operated on principles decades ahead of terrestrial science, projects that could reshape the future of human civilization. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. He wasn't being hired to develop new technology from scratch. He was being recruited to reverse engineer devices that had already been built by someone else, someone not from Earth. The facility, he learned, housed 9 craft of extraterrestrial origin. His job would be to figure out how they worked, particularly their propulsion systems, to unlock secrets that could give humanity the ability to travel between stars. As Lazar absorbed this information, part of his scientific mind rebelled. This was the stuff of science fiction, not serious research. But another part recognized the opportunity of a lifetime, the chance to study technology that might be decades or centuries ahead of current human capabilities. The desert wind whispered outside the underground briefing room. Somewhere above, the Nevada sky stretched vast and dark, filled with stars that suddenly seemed much less distant. Bob Lazar's journey into the impossible had begun. Stepping into S4 for the first time felt like entering another world. The facility stretched deep into the mountainside, a maze of corridors and laboratories carved from living rock. Everything was bathed in the sterile glow of fluorescent lighting, creating an environment that felt both futuristic and somehow timeless. According to Lazar's description, the main feature of S4 was immediately apparent: a series of hangar doors built into the mountainside at approximately 60-degree angles. 9 doors in total, each large enough to accommodate aircraft unlike anything in the conventional world. The doors themselves were masterfully camouflaged, covered with a material that perfectly mimicked the texture and color of natural rock. From the outside, the facility would be virtually invisible to satellite observation. The hangar doors blended seamlessly with the mountain's natural contours. Only someone who knew exactly what to look for would notice the subtle geometric patterns that betrayed the presence of artificial construction. The interior of S4 revealed the full scope of the operation. Beyond the hangars lay workshops equipped with tools and instruments that seemed both familiar and alien. Standard electronic equipment sat alongside devices whose purpose was initially unclear. Computer terminals displayed data in formats that would take weeks to fully understand. Most remarkably, the facility seemed to operate under different rules than typical government installations. Security was tight, but it was also compartmentalized in unusual ways. Scientists working in one area might have no knowledge of projects happening just down the hall. Information was shared on a strict need-to-know basis, creating islands of knowledge within the larger operation. Lazar's initial tour revealed glimpses of the extraordinary. Through partially opened hangar doors, he caught sight of curved metallic surfaces that reflected light in unusual patterns. These weren't the sharp angles and riveted seams of conventional aircraft. These were smooth, organic shapes that seemed to flow like liquid mercury frozen in motion. The technology permeating S4 represented a curious mixture of the advanced and the primitive. Some systems operated with a sophistication that defied current understanding. Others seemed to rely on principles so fundamental that they bordered on the crude, though their applications were anything but simple. In the workshops, Lazar observed equipment designed to analyze materials at the atomic level, devices that could map electromagnetic fields in 3 dimensions, instruments that measured gravitational effects too subtle for conventional detection. The precision required for this work was staggering, yet it was being conducted with an efficiency that suggested years of experience. The personnel at S4 were as unusual as the facility itself. Scientists from various disciplines, but all sharing a common trait: the ability to think beyond conventional limitations. Many seemed to have been working on the project for years. Their familiarity with impossible technologies apparent in their casual discussions of concepts that should have been revolutionary. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of S4 was the atmosphere of absolute secrecy that permeated everything. Conversations stopped when unfamiliar faces appeared. Documents were secured with security protocols that went beyond anything Lazar had encountered at Los Alamos. The sense that the outside world could never know about this place was palpable. The layout of the facility reflected both security concerns and practical necessities. The 9 hangars were connected by underground passages, allowing movement between areas without surface exposure. Living quarters and dining facilities were minimal. This wasn't a place where people were meant to spend extended periods. Most work at S4 was conducted during brief, intensive sessions. Scientists would arrive, focus on specific problems, then depart. The overall picture of what was being accomplished was kept deliberately fragmented, ensuring that no individual could fully comprehend the scope of the operation. Yet despite these precautions, Lazar began to piece together the larger purpose of S4. This wasn't simply a research facility, it was a reverse engineering operation of unprecedented ambition. The goal was nothing less than understanding and duplicating technology from another world. The implications were staggering. If successful, the project could revolutionize human civilization, energy production, transportation, space exploration. Every aspect of technological development could be accelerated by decades or centuries. But the risks were equally profound. What if the technology couldn't be safely controlled? What if its creators objected to human attempts at duplication? These questions haunted the corridors of S4, though they were rarely discussed openly. The focus was purely technical: understand the principles, document the processes, gradually build human capability to reproduce the technologies being studied. The broader implications were left for others to consider. As Lazar settled into his role at the facility, the sheer scale of what was being attempted became clear. This wasn't a small-scale research project. This was a concentrated effort to bridge the gap between current human technology and something far more advanced. The investment in time, money, and intellectual resources was enormous. The desert above remained oblivious to the activities hidden beneath its surface. Tour buses carrying curious visitors to the outskirts of Area 51 had no idea that they were driving within miles of the most extraordinary scientific project in human history. The secrecy wasn't just about national security. It was about maintaining the stability of reality itself. For if the public knew what was happening at S4, if they understood the technologies being studied and the implications for humanity's future, the world would never be the same. The revelation would shatter assumptions about our place in the universe, our technological capabilities, and our readiness to join a larger cosmic community. Deep underground, surrounded by impossible technologies and sworn to absolute secrecy, Bob Lazar prepared to confront the greatest challenge of his scientific career. The journey into the unknown was about to begin in earnest. Of all the craft housed within S4's underground hangars, one captured Bob Lazar's attention above all others. He would later refer to it as the sport model, a designation that somehow made the impossible seem slightly more manageable. But nothing could have prepared him for that first direct encounter with technology from another world. The hangar door rolled open with a whisper of precisely engineered mechanisms. Inside, bathed in the soft glow of overhead lighting, sat an object that challenged every assumption about aerospace design. It wasn't the product of human engineering, with its straight lines and functional angles. Instead, it possessed an organic elegance that seemed to blur the boundary between technology and art. The sport model measured approximately 52 feet in diameter and 61 feet in height. Its shape was that of a classic flying disc, the archetypal flying saucer of popular imagination. Yet seeing it in person revealed details that no science fiction film had ever captured. The surface was seamless, as if the entire craft had been formed from a single piece of material. No rivets, no welded joints, no visible access panels broke the smooth continuity of its exterior. The metal itself defied easy classification. Lazar would later describe it as resembling liquid titanium that had been frozen in motion. It possessed a pewter-like appearance with subtle variations in texture that suggested internal structure. Under direct lighting, the surface seemed to absorb and reflect illumination in ways that conventional materials simply didn't match. But the most striking feature wasn't visible at first glance. As Lazar circled the craft, he noticed that its bottom section featured 3 prominent bulges arranged in a triangular pattern. These weren't simple appendages, they were the heart of the propulsion system, though their true function would only become apparent through careful study. The interior of the sport model was equally extraordinary. Accessing the craft required understanding a door mechanism that operated on principles unlike any human technology. There were no handles, no obvious controls. Instead, the entry seemed to respond to proximity and intention in ways that suggested an interface between the craft and its occupants that went beyond simple mechanical operation. Inside, the dimensions seemed to expand beyond what the exterior would suggest. The central area featured 2 levels connected by what appeared to be a pole or column running through the center of the craft. The upper level contained what could only be described as a control area, though the controls themselves bore no resemblance to anything in human aircraft. Instead of switches, dials, and displays, the control surfaces seemed to be integrated into the craft's structure. Smooth panels that might respond to touch, surfaces that could display information when needed and become transparent when not. The overall impression was of a technology so advanced that the distinction between the craft and its control systems had dissolved entirely. The seating arrangement was perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the interior. The chairs, if they could be called that, seemed sized for occupants significantly smaller than average humans. The proportions suggested beings with different physical characteristics, reinforcing the craft's extraterrestrial origins in a way that mere technical specifications couldn't match. But it was the propulsion system that truly captured Lazar's scientific imagination. The 3 bulges on the craft's underside housed what he would learn were gravity amplifiers, devices that could manipulate gravitational fields in ways that conventional physics insisted were impossible. Each amplifier could focus gravitational effects in specific directions, allowing the craft to fall toward any desired destination. The power source for this remarkable system was equally extraordinary. At the heart of the craft was a reactor that operated on principles that challenged fundamental assumptions about energy production. Instead of chemical combustion or nuclear fission, the reactor supposedly utilized matter-antimatter annihilation, triggered by an exotic element, element 115, that didn't exist in any terrestrial laboratory. According to Lazar's analysis, element 115 served as both fuel and the key to the antimatter production process. When bombarded with protons, atoms of element 115 would transmute to element 116, which would then decay and release antiprotons. These antiprotons, when directed toward matter targets, would annihilate completely and convert to pure energy, with an efficiency that made conventional power sources look primitive by comparison. The technical elegance of the system was breathtaking. The gravity amplifiers didn't push against the surrounding environment like conventional propulsion systems. Instead, they created distortions in spacetime itself, allowing the craft to move by manipulating the fundamental fabric of reality. The result was motion without acceleration, maneuvers without inertial effects, and performance characteristics that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Yet, as Lazar studied the sport model more closely, he began to understand that it wasn't violating natural laws. It was operating according to principles that human science hadn't yet discovered. The technology represented not magic, but physics taken to its logical conclusions. It was science advanced to the point where the impossible became routine. The implications were staggering. If humans could understand and duplicate this technology, the results would revolutionize everything. Interstellar travel would become feasible. Energy production would be transformed. The entire trajectory of human technological development would be accelerated by centuries. But understanding the principles was only the first step. Actually duplicating the technology would require capabilities that humanity might not possess for decades or centuries. The precision required, the exotic materials needed, the manufacturing techniques necessary, all represented challenges that pushed the boundaries of current human capabilities. Still, the opportunity was unprecedented. Here was a complete functional example of technology from a civilization that had solved problems humanity was only beginning to comprehend. Every measurement, every analysis, every insight gained from studying the sport model was a step toward understanding principles that could transform the future of human civilization. As Lazar concluded his initial examination of the craft, he felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was being trusted with secrets that could change the world. Knowledge that, if properly understood and applied, could usher in a new age of human technological capability. But he was also aware that such knowledge came with risks that were equally profound. The sport model sat silently in its hangar, waiting for human minds to unlock its secrets. In the sterile light of S4's underground facility, it represented both humanity's greatest opportunity and its most challenging puzzle. In the heart of the sport model's reactor sat a sample of element 115, approximately 223 grams of a metallic substance that, according to official science, could not exist on Earth. Bob Lazar found himself face to face with matter that challenged the foundations of chemistry, physics, and our understanding of the periodic table itself. Element 115 occupied a position on the periodic table that, in 1989, remained purely theoretical. Scientists had predicted that such super-heavy elements might be possible, but the energy required to create them in particle accelerators was enormous, and any atoms produced would exist for only fractions of a second before decaying into lighter elements. Yet here was a substantial quantity of element 115, stable enough to serve as fuel for an advanced propulsion system. Its very existence suggested that the creators of the sport model possessed manufacturing capabilities far beyond anything humans had achieved. They could not only create super-heavy elements, but stabilize them in isotopes that remained coherent for extended periods. The metallic sample had an unusual appearance, silvery, but with properties that distinguished it from any terrestrial metal. Its density was remarkable, yet it could be handled with relative safety using appropriate precautions. The material seemed to possess a kind of internal stability that prevented the rapid decay typical of artificially created super-heavy elements. According to Lazar's analysis, element 115's role in the propulsion system was elegantly simple yet revolutionary in its implications. When placed in the reactor and bombarded with protons from a small particle accelerator, atoms of element 115 would absorb the additional proton and transmute into element 116. This transmutation was inherently unstable, causing the element 116 to almost immediately decay. But the decay process was what made the entire system extraordinary. Instead of simply breaking down into lighter elements and releasing energy, the decay of element 116 produced antiprotons, the antimatter equivalent of ordinary protons. These antiprotons were then channeled through a sophisticated containment system that prevented them from coming into contact with normal matter until the precise moment when energy production was desired. The antimatter production process represented a level of technological sophistication that dwarfed human capabilities. Terrestrial science had managed to produce tiny quantities of antimatter in laboratory settings, but storing and manipulating it required enormous magnetic containment systems that consumed more energy than the antimatter could provide. The sport model's reactor accomplished the same feat with compact, efficient systems that seemed to operate with casual reliability. When energy production was required, the stored antiprotons were directed toward a gaseous matter target. The collision between matter and antimatter resulted in total annihilation, both particles converting completely into pure energy, according to Einstein's famous equation, E equals mc squared. The energy yield was enormous, providing power sufficient to operate both the craft's propulsion system and its other systems with what appeared to be virtually unlimited endurance. But element 115's function extended beyond simple fuel production. According to Lazar's understanding, the element also played a crucial role in the gravity amplification system. The strong nuclear force that held the element 115 nucleus together created what he described as a gravity wave, a distortion in the gravitational field that could be focused and directed through the craft's gravity amplifiers. This represented perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the entire system. Rather than simply producing energy, Element 115 was generating controllable gravitational effects. The craft could essentially create its own gravitational field, independent of any external gravitational sources. This meant it could fall in any direction by generating gravitational distortions that pulled it toward its desired destination. The technical implications were staggering. Traditional propulsion systems worked by pushing against something. Rocket engines pushing against expelled mass, jet engines pushing against air, propellers pushing against water. But the sport model's propulsion system worked by manipulating the fundamental fabric of spacetime itself. It didn't push against anything external. It created gravitational fields that allowed it to control its own motion through space. This explained the extraordinary performance characteristics that witnesses had reported in UFO sightings for decades. Sudden acceleration without apparent propulsion signatures, right-angle turns at high speed without deceleration, movement that seemed to ignore inertial effects that would crush human occupants. If the craft was manipulating gravity rather than using conventional propulsion, these maneuvers became not only possible but routine. The sample of element 115 at S4 represented more than just exotic fuel. It was evidence of a manufacturing capability that suggested its creators had mastered atomic engineering at levels human science could only dream of achieving. Creating stable isotopes of superheavy elements required not just enormous energy input, but precise control over nuclear processes that pushed the boundaries of what might be physically possible. Yet here it was, a tangible piece of matter from a technology base so advanced that its very existence challenged human assumptions about what was achievable. Every test, every measurement, every analysis of the element 115 sample provided glimpses into scientific principles that could revolutionize human understanding of physics and chemistry. The implications extended far beyond propulsion technology. If element 115 could be synthesized and stabilized by human science, it might unlock entirely new approaches to energy production, materials science, and space travel. The element represented not just a component of alien technology, but a key to advancing human civilization by decades or centuries. But the challenges were equally daunting. Creating even tiny amounts of element 115 required particle accelerators of enormous power and sophistication. Stabilizing it into useful isotopes might require techniques that wouldn't be developed for decades. And understanding its full properties and applications could take generations of research. As Lazar studied the element 115 sample, he was acutely aware that he was handling matter that might represent humanity's future, if we could unlock its secrets. By March 1989, Bob Lazar had been working at S4 for several months, gradually piecing together the secrets of extraterrestrial propulsion technology. But knowing about the impossible and seeing it in action were two entirely different experiences. What happened on those Wednesday nights in the Nevada desert would provide the most compelling evidence and the most dangerous exposure of his entire involvement with the Bride program. The test flights, Lazar learned, followed a regular schedule. Every Wednesday evening, one of the craft would be taken from its hangar for flight testing in the restricted airspace above Papoose Lake. These weren't full-scale operational flights, but careful, methodical tests designed to verify the performance characteristics of the propulsion systems under various conditions. The timing was deliberate. Wednesday evening flights occurred after normal work hours, when fewer personnel would be present at nearby facilities. The desert darkness provided natural concealment, and the restricted airspace ensured that no civilian aircraft would inadvertently witness the tests. It should have been a perfectly secure environment for conducting experiments with impossible technology. But Lazar had begun sharing details of his work with close friends. The burden of keeping such extraordinary secrets was enormous, and he needed trusted confidants who could help him process the implications of what he was experiencing. Gene Huff, a close friend and real estate appraiser, became his primary confidant. Through Huff, the circle expanded to include John Lear, a veteran pilot with connections to the aviation community and a long-standing interest in UFO phenomena. The temptation to witness the Wednesday night tests proved irresistible. Lazar knew the approximate schedule and understood the geographic layout of the test area. From public land outside the restricted zone, it might be possible to observe the flights from a distance. The opportunity to see the technology in action, rather than simply studying it in static displays, was too valuable to pass up. The first expedition took place on March 22, 1989. Lazar, his wife Tracy, Gene Huff, and John Lear drove into the desert using Lear's recreational vehicle. They positioned themselves on a ridge overlooking the Papoose Lake area, equipped with binoculars and cameras, hoping to catch a glimpse of technology that officially didn't exist. They weren't disappointed. Through Lear's telescope, they observed an elliptical light source performing maneuvers that defied conventional aerospace capabilities. The object moved with precision and purpose, executing patterns that would have been impossible for any known aircraft. The sighting lasted approximately 7 minutes, long enough to confirm that something extraordinary was indeed taking place in the restricted airspace above the desert floor. The second expedition, on March 29, proved even more rewarding. This time, they brought video equipment and managed to capture footage of a glowing object performing aerial maneuvers unlike anything in the conventional aviation world. The timestamp on the recording showed 8:30 p.m., precisely when Lazar had predicted the test would occur based on his knowledge of the facility's schedule. The video footage, though taken from a considerable distance, showed an object that exhibited the performance characteristics Lazar had described: sudden acceleration, instantaneous changes in direction, movement patterns that seemed to ignore the physical constraints that governed normal aircraft. For the first time, there was visual evidence to support Lazar's extraordinary claims about the technology being tested at S4. The third expedition, on April 5, would prove to be their last. The group had become increasingly confident in their ability to observe the tests without detection, perhaps too confident. They brought additional witnesses, including Tracy's sister, expanding the circle of people who had direct knowledge of the Wednesday night flights. But their activities hadn't gone unnoticed. Security around the Nevada test site was sophisticated and multi-layered. Motion sensors, infrared surveillance, and regular patrols were designed to detect exactly the kind of unauthorized observation that Lazar's group was conducting. While they had initially been careful to stay on public land, their presence in the area during sensitive test periods had attracted attention. The confrontation came as they were leaving the area after the April 5 observation. Lincoln County Sheriff's deputies, working in coordination with site security, stopped their vehicles and conducted identification checks. The deputies were professional but thorough, documenting the names and details of everyone present. They were clearly operating under instructions to report any civilian presence during the Wednesday evening time periods. For Lazar, the encounter with law enforcement was the beginning of the end of his involvement with the S4 program. Within days, he was called to report to Indian Springs Airfield for debriefing. The session was tense and comprehensive. Security personnel had detailed transcripts of conversations that had taken place among the observation group, indicating that surveillance of their activities had been far more extensive than they had realized. The debriefing made clear that Lazar's security clearance was being revoked. The stated reason was concerns about his personal stability, specifically relating to problems in his marriage to Tracy. But the timing, immediately following the unauthorized desert observations, suggested that the real issue was his compromise of operational security through the Wednesday night expeditions. Lazar was effectively terminated from the program, though the process was handled in ways designed to maintain deniability. There was no formal dismissal, no official acknowledgement that he had ever worked on classified projects. Instead, his access was simply discontinued, his clearances withdrawn, and his connection to S4 severed as if it had never existed. But the damage to operational security had already been done. Multiple witnesses had observed flight tests of technology that was supposed to remain completely classified. Video footage existed that documented performance capabilities far beyond anything in the public domain. And Lazar himself possessed detailed knowledge of systems and procedures that could compromise the entire program if disclosed. The Wednesday night shows had provided compelling evidence of extraordinary technology, but they had also set in motion the chain of events that would ultimately bring Bob Lazar's story to public attention. The desert had revealed its secrets, but it had also ensured that those secrets could no longer be contained within the underground facilities of S4. The stage was set for revelations that would change how the world viewed Area 51, government secrecy, and the possibility that we are not alone in the universe. The phone call that would change everything came from investigative journalist George Knapp in May 1989. Knapp, working for Class Television in Las Vegas, had been following leads about unusual activities in the Nevada desert. Through a network of contacts that included aviation enthusiast John Lear, he had heard whispers about a physicist who claimed to have worked on extraterrestrial technology at a secret government facility. For Lazar, the decision to go public was not made lightly. The non-disclosure agreements he had signed carried serious criminal penalties. Speaking out about classified programs could result in decades in federal prison. But his abrupt dismissal from S4 had left him feeling betrayed by the system he had served. More importantly, he had come to believe that the American people had a right to know about technologies that could revolutionize human civilization. The initial approach was cautious. Knapp arranged for an anonymous interview, with Lazar's identity concealed and his voice altered. On May 15, 1989, KLAS television aired a live interview with a shadowy figure identified only as Dennis, ironically, the name of Lazar's former supervisor at S4. The interview was conducted in silhouette, with Lazar's face obscured and his voice electronically distorted. Despite these precautions, his words were clear and devastating. He described working at a facility called S4, located near the notorious Area 51. He claimed to have examined multiple craft of extraterrestrial origin and to have studied propulsion systems that operated on principles unknown to human science. The claims sounded like science fiction, but Lazar presented them with the calm precision of a trained scientist. He described specific technical details about gravity amplification, antimatter reactors, and element 115. He provided information about facility layouts, security procedures, and the organizational structure of the reverse engineering program. Most importantly, he offered specific, verifiable predictions about the timing and location of test flights. The initial interview created an immediate sensation. Class television was flooded with calls from viewers who wanted to know more. Other media outlets began following the story. UFO researchers, who had long speculated about government possession of extraterrestrial technology, suddenly had detailed testimony from someone claiming direct involvement in such programs. But the most significant response came from those within government and military circles, who recognized that something unprecedented had occurred. For the first time, someone with apparent insider knowledge was providing specific, technical details about classified aerospace programs. Whether Lazar's claims were true or false, they represented a massive security breach. The pressure on Lazar to either recant his statements or provide additional verification was enormous. Supporters urged him to come forward with his real identity and provide additional evidence. Critics demanded proof that could substantiate his extraordinary claims. Government representatives, through unofficial channels, made clear that serious consequences awaited if he continued speaking publicly about classified programs. By November 1989, Lazar had made the decision to reveal his identity. In a follow-up interview with George Knapp, he appeared on camera without disguise, using his real name and providing additional details about his time at S4. The revelation that Dennis was actually Bob Lazar, a scientist with documented connections to Los Alamos National Laboratory, added credibility to his claims while simultaneously making him a target for both supporters and detractors. The November interview provided additional technical information that demonstrated Lazar's sophisticated understanding of advanced physics concepts. He drew diagrams of the craft he had studied, explained the theoretical principles behind gravity amplification, and described the manufacturing processes that might be required to duplicate extraterrestrial technology. The level of detail was remarkable for someone supposedly fabricating the entire story. But coming forward publicly also exposed Lazar to intense scrutiny of his background and credentials. Investigators discovered that the educational institutions where he claimed to have earned degrees had no record of his attendance. Employment records that should have documented his work at Los Alamos were missing or contradictory. Critics seized on these discrepancies as evidence that his entire story was fabricated. The controversy surrounding Lazar's credentials overshadowed much of the technical content of his revelations. Instead of focusing on the specific claims about extraterrestrial technology, media attention shifted to questions about his education, employment history, and personal character. The debate became as much about Lazar himself as about the extraordinary technologies he claimed to have studied. Yet, for those willing to look past the personal controversies, Lazar's revelations contained remarkable consistency and technical sophistication. His descriptions of advanced propulsion systems, exotic materials, and classified facility operations remained coherent across multiple interviews and decades of questioning. The specific predictions he made about test flight schedules proved accurate for those brave enough to venture into the Nevada desert to observe. The impact of Lazar's public revelations extended far beyond UFO research communities. His interviews brought Area 51 into mainstream public consciousness for the first time. The facility, which had been successfully hidden from public awareness for decades, suddenly became the subject of intense media attention and public speculation. Government response to the revelations was carefully measured. Officials neither confirmed nor denied Lazar's specific claims. Instead, they maintained standard positions about not commenting on classified programs, while simultaneously working to discredit Lazar's credibility through selective release of information about his background and character. The strategy was effective in maintaining official deniability while raising sufficient questions about Lazar's reliability to prevent his claims from being accepted. But it could not undo the fundamental change that his revelations had created in public awareness of secret aerospace programs and the possibility of government possession of extraterrestrial technology. By the end of 1989, Bob Lazar had transformed from an unknown government contractor into the most famous UFO whistleblower in history. His claims had sparked international interest in Area 51, generated countless investigations and documentaries, and established the template for how insider accounts of secret programs would be evaluated by both believers and skeptics. The revelation was complete, but the controversy it generated would continue for decades. In the remote Nevada desert, the secrets that had been kept for years were now part of public discourse, forever changing how the world viewed government secrecy and the possibilities hidden within classified programs. The response to Bob Lazar's revelations was swift and comprehensive. Within weeks of his public appearances, he found himself at the center of a campaign that seemed designed to systematically destroy his credibility. The message was clear. Those who violate the sanctity of classified programs would face consequences that extended far beyond legal prosecution. The first sign of retaliation came through his business interests. Lazar operated a small scientific supply company called United Nuclear, specializing in providing materials for educational and research purposes. Shortly after his public interviews, the company began experiencing unusual problems. Suppliers became reluctant to fulfill orders. Regulatory agencies initiated unexpected inspections. Customers reported receiving visits from unidentified officials, asking about their purchases. More troubling were the direct personal encounters. Lazar described being followed by unmarked vehicles, having his phone calls monitored, and receiving visits from individuals who identified themselves as federal agents but provided no official documentation. The harassment was subtle but persistent, designed to create an atmosphere of constant surveillance and pressure. The most devastating attack came through the systematic erasure of his documented history. Educational institutions that should have had records of his attendance claimed no knowledge of him. Employment records from Los Alamos, which had previously confirmed his work there, became difficult to verify. Professional references reported being contacted by officials who advised against supporting Lazar's credibility. The campaign extended to his personal relationships. Family members and friends found themselves subjects of background investigations. Former colleagues were pressured to distance themselves from any association with Lazar. The social network that had supported him throughout his career began to fragment under official pressure. In 1990, Lazar was arrested on charges related to allegedly facilitating prostitution. The charges stemmed from his relationship with a legal brothel in Nevada. But the timing, coming just months after his public revelations, struck many as suspicious. Critics of the government response pointed out that the investigation seemed unusually thorough for what should have been a minor local matter. The legal proceedings were handled in ways that maximized public exposure of Lazar's personal problems, while minimizing focus on the substance of his UFO claims. Media coverage emphasized the criminal charges, while treating his testimony about extraterrestrial technology as increasingly questionable. The strategy effectively shifted public attention away from government secrets and toward personal character issues. But the most sophisticated aspect of the campaign against Lazar involved the careful manipulation of information about his background. Rather than simply denying his claims, officials orchestrated a process of selective disclosure that raised questions about virtually every aspect of his professional history. The approach created doubt without requiring direct confrontation of his technical testimony. Educational credentials became the primary battleground. MIT and Caltech, the institutions where Lazar claimed to have earned degrees, issued statements denying any record of his attendance. The statements were unambiguous and seemingly authoritative, yet supporters pointed out that if Lazar had indeed worked on classified programs, his educational records might have been altered or sealed as part of standard security procedures. Employment verification proved equally problematic. Los Alamos National Laboratory, which had previously acknowledged Lazar's work there, began providing carefully worded statements that neither confirmed nor denied his employment. The laboratory's phone directory listing that had included his name was explained as covering contractors and temporary personnel rather than regular employees. The pattern suggested a level of coordination that extended across multiple institutions and agencies. Records that had previously been accessible became unavailable. Officials who had previously confirmed information became unable to comment. Documentation that should have supported Lazar's background simply disappeared from accessible sources. Meanwhile, Lazar's technical claims about Element 115 and advanced propulsion systems were largely ignored in favor of focusing on credential controversies. The strategy was effective in shifting the debate away from areas where Lazar possessed detailed knowledge toward questions about his basic truthfulness and reliability. Friends and family members reported experiencing their own forms of pressure. Some described being approached by officials who suggested that continued association with Lazar could affect their own careers or security clearances. Others found themselves subjects of tax audits, regulatory investigations, or other forms of bureaucratic harassment that created significant personal costs for supporting his testimony. The psychological impact on Lazar was significant. The constant surveillance, legal pressures, and social isolation took their toll on someone who had never expected to become a public figure. Friends described him as becoming increasingly cautious and withdrawn, reluctant to discuss his experiences even with trusted confidants. Yet the campaign also had unintended consequences. The obvious coordination and sophistication of the response to Lazar's claims convinced many observers that there was indeed something significant being concealed. The government's reaction seemed disproportionate to what should have been the ravings of a delusional individual if his claims were entirely false. UFO researchers began documenting patterns in how other potential whistleblowers were treated when they attempted to come forward with claims about classified programs. The Lazar case became a template for understanding how government agencies responded to unauthorized disclosures about sensitive aerospace research. The message to other potential witnesses was unmistakable. Speaking publicly about classified programs would result in personal destruction that extended far beyond legal consequences. Career destruction, social isolation, and constant harassment would be the price for violating the code of silence that protected government secrets. By the mid-1990s, Lazar had largely withdrawn from public appearances and interviews. The relentless pressure had achieved its intended effect, silencing one of the most detailed and technically sophisticated accounts of alleged government involvement with extraterrestrial technology. But the story he had told continued to resonate, inspiring others to investigate claims about secret aerospace programs and government possession of exotic technologies. The backlash against Bob Lazar demonstrated the lengths to which powerful institutions would go to protect classified information. It also revealed the vulnerability of individuals who chose to challenge the boundaries of official secrecy, regardless of their motivations or the potential importance of their revelations. 35 years after Bob Lazar first described element 115, the relationship between his claims and scientific reality has become increasingly complex. What once seemed like pure science fiction has, in some respects, been validated by subsequent discoveries. Yet significant gaps remain between Lazar's descriptions and what mainstream science has been able to achieve. The most striking vindication came in 2003, when Russian scientists successfully synthesized element 115 inches laboratory conditions. The achievement validated Lazar's prediction that such an element could exist, despite skeptics who had dismissed his claims as impossible. Element 115 was officially added to the periodic table in 2016, given the name Moscovium in honor of Moscow. However, the element 115 created in laboratories differs dramatically from what Lazar described. The synthesized isotopes are highly unstable, decaying within milliseconds rather than maintaining the stability required for use as a fuel source. Creating even a few atoms requires enormous particle accelerators and consumes far more energy than the element could ever produce. Lazar's description of element 115 as a stable, metallic fuel that could be handled in substantial quantities remains far beyond current scientific capabilities. The technological gap between laboratory synthesis of individual atoms and industrial-scale production of stable isotopes represents decades or centuries of potential development. Yet some physicists have noted that Lazar's theoretical framework for element 115's properties isn't entirely inconsistent with advanced nuclear. The concept of an island of stability among super-heavy elements suggests that certain isotopes might indeed be more stable than current laboratory results indicate. The possibility exists that sufficiently advanced manufacturing techniques could produce the stable isotopes Lazar described. The propulsion principles Lazar outlined have also proven more credible over time. His descriptions of gravity, manipulation, and space-time distortion align with concepts that have gained acceptance within theoretical physics. The idea that sufficiently advanced technology could generate artificial gravitational fields is no longer considered impossible, merely far beyond current human capabilities. Recent developments in metamaterial research and quantum field manipulation have provided theoretical frameworks for some of the effects Lazar described. While we cannot yet create the technologies he claimed to have studied, we can now envision physical principles that might make such technologies possible. The gap between current human science and Lazar's descriptions has narrowed, though it remains substantial. Dr. Harold Puthoff, a respected physicist who has worked on classified government programs, has noted that Lazar's technical descriptions demonstrate sophisticated understanding of advanced physics concepts. Whether Lazar gained this understanding through direct experience with extraterrestrial technology or through extensive study of theoretical physics remains debatable. But his grasp of complex scientific principles is evident. The anti-gravity propulsion system Lazar described operates on principles that don't violate known physics so much as extend them into unexplored territories. The concept of manipulating the curvature of space-time to achieve propulsion is theoretically sound, though the energy requirements and technical challenges would be enormous using current understanding and capabilities. Independent analysis of Lazar's technical claims has revealed remarkable internal consistency. His descriptions of how gravity amplifiers would function, how element 115 would decay to produce antimatter, and how the overall propulsion system would operate all align with advanced theoretical physics. The level of detail and technical accuracy suggests either direct experience with such systems or an extraordinarily sophisticated understanding of cutting-edge physics. Yet significant scientific objections remain. The energy requirements for the processes Lazar described would be enormous, potentially requiring power generation capabilities far beyond anything currently conceivable. The precision required for manipulating gravitational fields at the scales he described would demand manufacturing tolerances that might not be physically achievable. The antimatter containment and manipulation systems Lazar described would require technologies that represent fundamental advances over current capabilities. Storing meaningful quantities of antimatter remains one of the most challenging problems in physics, requiring magnetic containment systems that consume enormous amounts of energy. The compact, efficient antimatter systems Lazar described would represent revolutionary breakthroughs in multiple fields of physics and engineering. Materials science presents additional challenges. The exotic alloys and manufacturing techniques Lazar described for constructing the craft would require capabilities that are centuries ahead of current human technology. Single-piece construction, he observed, would demand manufacturing processes that exist only in theoretical discussions among advanced materials researchers. However, some aspects of Lazar's descriptions have found unexpected support from subsequent scientific developments. His claims about the craft's ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields align with research into metamaterials and electromagnetic cloaking. His descriptions of advanced control systems that respond to thought or proximity match developments in brain-computer interfaces and ambient computing. The debate within the scientific community about Lazar's claims has evolved from dismissal to cautious curiosity. While few mainstream scientists accept his testimony at face value, increasing numbers acknowledge that his technical descriptions are sophisticated enough to warrant serious analysis rather than immediate rejection. The emergence of government acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena with performance characteristics that seem impossible using known technology has also changed the context for evaluating Lazar's claims. If objects with capabilities matching his descriptions are indeed operating in terrestrial airspace, the question becomes not whether such technology is possible, but rather who has developed it and how. Recent Pentagon disclosures about advanced aerospace programs have revealed that government research into exotic propulsion concepts has continued far beyond what was previously acknowledged. While these programs have not achieved the capabilities Lazar described, they demonstrate that serious scientific effort has been invested in exploring the theoretical foundations of his claims. The relationship between Bob Lazar's testimony and established science continues to evolve as human understanding advances. What remains constant is the challenge his claims present to conventional assumptions about the limits of technology and the possibilities hidden within classified research. Whether Lazar's descriptions represent direct experience with impossible technology or extraordinary insight into theoretical possibilities that human science has not yet achieved, they continue to push the boundaries of what we consider possible in aerospace engineering and fundamental physics. Bob Lazar's testimony might have remained an isolated claim, if not for the emergence of other witnesses who provided corroborating details about unusual activities at Area 51 and related facilities. While none possessed Lazar's detailed technical knowledge, their accounts created a broader picture of extraordinary projects hidden within America's most classified aerospace programs. Among the most significant supporting testimonies came from former Area 51 security personnel. Fred Dunham, who worked as a security guard at Groom Lake from 1981 to 1992, provided insights into the facility's operations during the period when Lazar claimed to be working there. While Dunham stated he had no direct knowledge of extraterrestrial technology, he confirmed many details about Area 51's security procedures and transportation arrangements that matched Lazar's descriptions. More intriguingly, Dunham acknowledged awareness of a facility designation S4 within the broader Nevada test site complex, though he claimed it was a small electronic warfare building, rather than the massive underground facility Lazar described. The existence of any S4 designation within the area lent some credibility to Lazar's claims, even if the facility's actual purpose remained disputed. Captain David Fruhoff, a former SR-71 pilot who flew missions from Area 51, provided perhaps the most significant corroboration of Lazar's basic claims about his presence at the facility. Before his death, Fruhoff stated that Lazar's descriptions of Area 51 were entirely accurate and that he was aware of a place called S4, though he knew nothing about what activities took place there. Most importantly, Fruhoff confirmed that small groups of employees would board unmarked buses for transportation to locations south of Area 51, in the direction of Papoose Lake. This corroborated Lazar's account of being transported by bus from Groom Lake to the S4 facility, lending credibility to one of the most specific claims in his testimony. George Knapp, the journalist who first brought Lazar's story to public attention, conducted extensive investigations that uncovered additional supporting evidence. Through his contacts within the aerospace industry and government circles, Knapp gathered testimonies from other individuals who reported awareness of projects involving exotic technologies at Nevada test site facilities. While most of these sources demanded anonymity due to security concerns, their accounts provided a consistent picture of research activities that pushed the boundaries of conventional aerospace engineering. Several described witnessing aircraft or objects with performance characteristics that seemed impossible, using known propulsion systems. John Lear, the experienced pilot who had introduced Lazar to George Knapp, provided his own testimony about unusual aerial phenomena observed in the Nevada desert. Lear's credibility as a veteran aviator and his connections within the aerospace industry made his supporting testimony particularly valuable for those inclined to believe. Gene Huff, Lazar's close friend who had accompanied him on the desert expeditions to observe test flights, remained a consistent supporter and witness to the events that led to Lazar's public revelations. Huff's detailed recollections of the Wednesday night observations and his first-hand knowledge of Lazar's emotional state during this period provided important context for understanding the circumstances that led to the public disclosure. Dennis Mariani, another friend who had participated in the desert observations, corroborated the basic facts of the Wednesday night expeditions and the unusual aerial phenomena they had witnessed. While not possessing technical expertise to evaluate what they had seen, Mariani's testimony supported the claim that something extraordinary had been observed during the scheduled test flights. More controversial were testimonies from individuals claiming to have worked on related projects at other classified facilities. Dan Burish, whose real name was Dan Crane, claimed to have worked with extraterrestrial biological materials at Area 51, including interaction with a living extraterrestrial designated J-Rod. While Burish's claims were even more extraordinary than Lazar's, they contributed to a pattern of testimony about exotic research programs hidden within America's most classified facilities. Anonymous sources, quoted by investigative journalists over the years, have provided additional fragments of corroborating information. Former military personnel, aerospace contractors, and government employees have reported awareness of projects involving technologies that seem decades ahead of acknowledged capabilities. While the anonymity of these sources limits their verification, the consistency of their accounts has contributed to ongoing speculation about secret programs. The emergence of government acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena with extraordinary performance characteristics has provided new context for evaluating witness testimonies. Military personnel who previously could not discuss unusual aerial encounters have begun providing official testimony about objects displaying capabilities similar to those Lazar described. Commander David Fravor, the Navy pilot who encountered the famous Tic Tac UAP, described flight characteristics that closely matched some of Lazar's claims about the performance of the craft he studied. While Fravor made no claims about the origin of the objects he encountered, his testimony about their capabilities provided official acknowledgement that such technologies exist, regardless of their source. The testimonies of these various witnesses created a complex web of corroborating and contradictory information. While none possessed Lazar's detailed technical knowledge or claimed direct experience with extraterrestrial technology, their accounts collectively suggested that something extraordinary had indeed been taking place within America's most classified aerospace research programs. Critics have noted that many of the supporting witnesses were friends or associates of Lazar, raising questions about the independence of their testimonies. The UFO research community's tendency to accept and amplify claims that support preferred narratives has also been cited as a factor that might inflate the apparent credibility of witness accounts. However, the emergence of testimonies from individuals with no connection to Lazar or the UFO community, including military personnel and former government employees, has provided more robust support for at least some aspects of his claims. The pattern suggests that while the specific details of Lazar's story remain disputed, the broader claims about exotic research programs appear to have foundation in reality. The witness testimonies surrounding Bob Lazar's claims illustrate the challenges of evaluating extraordinary assertions in an environment where official secrecy makes independent verification nearly impossible. While the supporting accounts don't prove the existence of extraterrestrial technology at government facilities, they do suggest that remarkable research programs have been conducted at levels of classification that prevent public evaluation of their true nature and accomplishments. Before Bob Lazar's 1989 revelations, Area 51 existed in a peculiar state of official non-existence. The facility was known to aviation enthusiasts, defense industry insiders, and intelligence researchers, but it remained absent from public consciousness. Lazar's testimony changed that forever, transforming a classified military installation into perhaps the most famous secret base in the world. The transformation began immediately following the KLAS television interviews. Within months, what had been a forgotten corner of the Nevada desert became a destination for curious tourists, UFO researchers, and conspiracy theorists. The remote highway leading toward the facility, previously traveled mainly by government contractors and local ranchers, began seeing regular traffic from visitors hoping to catch a glimpse of the impossible. Hotels, restaurants, and gift shops began marketing themselves with Area 51 themes. The Little Alien in Rachel, Nevada, became an unlikely tourist destination, serving alien burgers to visitors who had driven hundreds of miles into the desert based on stories of crashed flying saucers and reverse-engineered technology. The phenomenon expanded far beyond Nevada tourism. Area 51 became a staple of popular entertainment, appearing in movies, television shows, books, and video games. Hollywood filmmakers found the concept irresistible. A secret government facility harboring alien technology provided the perfect backdrop for science fiction thrillers, conspiracy-driven narratives. Films like Independence Day featured Area 51 as the storage location for captured alien spacecraft, directly referencing themes from Lazar's testimony. The facility became synonymous with government cover-ups and hidden alien contact. Television series regularly incorporated Area 51 into their storylines, from dramatic series exploring government conspiracies to comedy shows that mocked the facility's association with UFO mythology. The base became a cultural shorthand for secret government activities and alleged alien contact, regardless of the specific context in which it was referenced. The internet age amplified Area 51's cultural significance. Online communities dedicated to analyzing satellite imagery of the facility proliferated. Discussions about the base's activities, security measures, and possible connection to extraterrestrial technology became staples of early internet forums and websites dedicated to conspiracy theories and unexplained phenomena. YouTube channels and podcasts devoted to Area 51 theories reached millions of viewers, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem of speculation and analysis. Every new satellite image, every reported sighting in the area, every government acknowledgement of the facility's existence was scrutinized for clues about hidden activities and secret technologies. The 2019 Storm Area 51 Facebook event demonstrated the facility's continued hold on public imagination. What began as a joke proposal to see them aliens attracted over 2 million people who indicated they would participate in a mass attempt to breach the SIN's facility's security perimeter. While the actual turnout was much smaller, the event showed how deeply Area 51 had penetrated popular consciousness. Government response to the cultural phenomenon was initially resistant, but gradually evolved toward limited acknowledgement. For decades, officials maintained that the facility didn't exist or refused to comment on its activities. However, the persistent public attention eventually forced a degree of official recognition and declassification of some historical activities. In 2013, the CIA officially acknowledged Area 51's existence and declassified documents detailing its role in testing the U-2 spy plane and other classified aircraft. The acknowledgement was limited and historical, focusing on programs that were decades old and no longer sensitive. Current activities remained classified, but the facility's existence was no longer officially deniable. The mainstream acceptance of Area 51 as a legitimate topic for historical research marked a significant shift in how government secrecy was discussed in public forums. Academic researchers began studying the facility's role in aerospace development, while journalists explored its impact on Cold War intelligence operations and technological advancement. Scientific institutions also began acknowledging Area 51's legitimate contributions to aerospace engineering. The facility's role in developing advanced aircraft, testing exotic propulsion concepts, and pushing the boundaries of flight technology became recognized as significant achievements worthy of historical documentation and analysis. However, the cultural legacy of Lazar's claims continued to overshadow the facility's acknowledged activities. Popular perception remained focused on alleged extraterrestrial connections rather than the documented achievements in conventional aerospace engineering. Area 51's association with alien technology proved more compelling than its real contributions to human aviation advancement. The phenomenon illustrated how extraordinary claims could reshape public perception of classified government activities. Lazar's testimony had taken a legitimate research facility and transformed it into a symbol of hidden alien contact and government cover-ups, creating a cultural narrative that proved more powerful than official denials or alternative explanations. Rock bands named themselves after the facility and Element 115. Artists created works exploring themes of government secrecy and alien contact, inspired by Area 51 mythology. The base became a cultural touchstone that transcended its original context as a classified aerospace research facility. Even serious discussions of government secrecy and classified research began incorporating Area 51 as a reference point. The facility became synonymous with the broader questions about what advanced technologies might be hidden within government programs and whether the public has a right to know about research conducted with taxpayer funding. The transformation of Area 51 from secret facility to cultural icon represents one of the most significant examples of how individual testimony can reshape public consciousness. Bob Lazar's claims, whether true or false, succeeded in permanently altering how Americans think about government secrecy, classified research, and the possibilities hidden within restricted military installations. Today, Area 51 exists simultaneously as a legitimate research facility conducting classified aerospace programs and as a symbol of humanity's relationship with the unknown. The tension between these two realities continues to drive public fascination with the Nevada desert facility that Bob Lazar put on the map more than 3 decades ago. In recent years, the context surrounding Bob Lazar's claims has shifted dramatically. Government acknowledgments of unidentified aerial phenomena, Pentagon releases of military encounter videos, and official testimony about objects displaying impossible flight characteristics have created a new framework for evaluating his decades-old testimony about reverse-engineered extraterrestrial technology. The transformation began in earnest in 2017, when the New York Times published revelations about the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, AATIP. The program, which had operated in secret for years, was tasked with investigating reports of unidentified aerial phenomena encountered by military personnel. The acknowledgement that such a program had existed represented a fundamental shift in official attitudes toward UAP research. Accompanying the Times article were videos released by the Pentagon showing encounters between military aircraft and objects, displaying flight characteristics that seemed to violate known principles of aerospace engineering. The Tic Tac, Gimbal, and FLIR 1 videos showed objects accelerating instantaneously, changing direction without apparent propulsion signatures, and moving at speeds that should have created visible atmospheric effects. Commander David Fravor, the Navy pilot who encountered the Tic Tac object, described performance capabilities that closely matched some of Lazar's claims about the craft he had studied at S4. The object displayed instantaneous acceleration, right-angle turns at high speed, and the ability to move without visible propulsion systems, characteristics that Lazar had described as typical of gravity-based propulsion technology. The official release of these videos and testimonies created a new legitimacy for discussions about advanced propulsion technologies that operate beyond current human capabilities. While the Pentagon made no claims about the origin of the objects, their acknowledgement that such technologies exist provided validation for at least some aspects of Lazar's technical descriptions. In 2020, the Pentagon formally released the 3 videos and acknowledged their authenticity, stating that the objects shown displayed characteristics that could not be explained using known aerospace technologies. The admission represented the most significant government acknowledgement of anomalous aerial phenomena since the closure of Project Blue Book decades earlier. The 2021 release of the Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force report to Congress provided additional context for evaluating Lazar's claims. The report acknowledged 144 instances of UAP encounters by military personnel, describing objects that demonstrated advanced propulsion capabilities and technologies that appeared decades ahead of known human achievements. While the report made no claims about extraterrestrial origin, it explicitly stated that some objects displayed technological capabilities that exceeded current understanding of aerospace engineering. The admission that such advanced technologies exist, regardless of their source, provided new credibility for claims about reverse engineering programs like those Lazar described. Luis Elizondo, the former director of ATIP, has made public statements suggesting that the U.S. government possesses materials and technologies recovered from UAP encounters, while stopping short of confirming extraterrestrial origin. Elizondo has indicated that these materials display properties that cannot be replicated using current manufacturing techniques. The establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, in 2022 represented formal institutionalization of government UAP research. The office's mandate includes investigating not only aerial phenomena, but also technologies that might represent advances beyond current human capabilities. The existence of such an office validates the premise that advanced propulsion technologies are indeed operating in terrestrial airspace. Recent testimonies from other government whistleblowers have added additional context to Lazar's claims. David Grush, a former intelligence official, has testified before Congress about the existence of crash retrieval programs and reverse engineering efforts involving technologies of non-human origin. While Grush's claims are disputed, they echo themes that Lazar introduced decades earlier. Scientific developments have also provided new context for evaluating Lazar's technical claims. Research into metamaterials, quantum field manipulation, and exotic matter has explored theoretical frameworks for some of the propulsion concepts he described. While practical implementation remains far beyond current capabilities, the theoretical foundations for his claims have gained scientific legitimacy. The emergence of commercial aerospace companies pursuing advanced propulsion research has also validated some of Lazar's predictions about future technological development. Companies like Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works have acknowledged research into revolutionary propulsion concepts that could enable capabilities similar to those Lazar described. Recent studies of the moscovium isotope element 115 have revealed properties that are closer to Lazar's descriptions than initially realized. While stable isotopes suitable for practical applications remain beyond current synthesis capabilities, research suggests that such isotopes might indeed be possible within advanced theoretical frameworks. The 2023 establishment of NASA's UAP Research Office and the increasing involvement of mainstream scientific institutions in anomalous phenomena. Research has further legitimized discussions about advanced technologies that were once relegated to fringe theories. The shift from ridicule to serious scientific inquiry has created an environment where Lazar's claims can be evaluated on their technical merits rather than dismissed outright. Perhaps most significantly, the modern acknowledgement of UAP with extraordinary capabilities has raised fundamental questions about the source of such technologies. If objects displaying the performance characteristics Lazar described are indeed operating in terrestrial airspace, the question becomes not whether such technologies exist, but rather who developed them and how they were acquired. The accumulation of official acknowledgments, witness testimonies, and technical developments has created a context where Lazar's decades-old claims appear less outlandish and more prophetic. While definitive proof of his specific assertions remains elusive, the broader narrative of government involvement with advanced propulsion technologies has gained substantial credibility. The modern evidence doesn't prove that Bob Lazar worked on extraterrestrial technology at S4, but it does demonstrate that technologies matching his descriptions are operating in ways that challenge conventional understanding of aerospace capabilities. Whether these technologies represent human breakthroughs or something more extraordinary remains an open question that continues to drive investigation and speculation. More than 3 decades after Bob Lazar first spoke about his experiences at S4, fundamental questions about his testimony remain unanswered. The passage of time has neither definitively proven nor completely debunked his claims, leaving researchers, government officials, and the public grappling with one of the most persistent mysteries in modern UFO lore. The most basic question, whether Lazar actually worked at a facility called S4, remains unresolved, despite decades of investigation. While some former Area 51 personnel have acknowledged awareness of an S4 designation within the Nevada test site complex, none have confirmed the existence of the massive underground facility that Lazar described. Satellite imagery of the Papoose Lake area has revealed no obvious evidence of the camouflaged hangar doors he claimed to have seen. Yet the absence of visible evidence doesn't necessarily invalidate his claims. If such a facility existed, it would have been designed specifically to avoid detection by satellite surveillance. The technology and resources available to classified programs could theoretically create installations that remain invisible to external observation, making verification through conventional means extremely difficult. The question of Lazar's educational background continues to generate controversy without clear resolution. While MIT and Caltech maintain they have no records of his attendance, supporters argue that such records could have been classified or altered if he had indeed worked on projects requiring the highest levels of security clearance. The selective availability of some documentation, while other records remain inaccessible, creates an ambiguous picture that supports both skeptical and believing interpretations. His technical knowledge presents perhaps the most intriguing puzzle. Lazar's descriptions of advanced propulsion systems, exotic materials, and theoretical physics concepts demonstrate sophisticated understanding that seems beyond what would be expected from someone fabricating the entire story. Yet the source of this knowledge, whether from direct experience with extraterrestrial technology or extensive study of theoretical physics, remains unclear. The Element 115 predictions have proven partially accurate, but incompletely vindicated. While the element was successfully synthesized and added to the periodic table, the stable isotopes Lazar described remain beyond current scientific capabilities. Whether this represents the limitations of human technology or evidence that his claims were based on incomplete understanding continues to be debated. The propulsion principles Lazar outlined have gained theoretical credibility as physics has advanced, but practical implementation remains far beyond current human capabilities. The gap between what he described and what science can currently achieve leaves room for interpretation about whether his claims represent glimpsed future possibilities or experienced realities. Government response to Lazar's claims has been consistently ambiguous, neither confirming nor definitively denying his specific assertions. The pattern of selective disclosure and careful non-denial suggests either sophisticated damage control for a legitimate security breach, or precisely the response one would expect to fabricated claims about classified programs. The emergence of other whistleblowers and government acknowledgments of UAP with extraordinary capabilities has provided new context for evaluating Lazar's testimony, but it hasn't resolved the fundamental questions about his specific claims. While the broader narrative of advanced technologies operating beyond human capabilities has gained credibility, the connection to Lazar's particular story remains circumstantial. Physical evidence remains the most significant gap in validating Lazar's testimony. Despite claims of having worked directly with exotic technologies and materials, no independently verifiable physical samples have emerged to support his assertions. The absence of such evidence represents either extremely effective security measures or a fundamental weakness in his account. The consistency of Lazar's story across decades of questioning provides both supporting and contradictory evidence. While the basic elements of his testimony have remained unchanged, critics note that this consistency could result from careful preparation rather than genuine experience. The lack of significant new details or unexpected revelations in recent interviews raises questions about whether his knowledge is complete or limited. The motivations behind Lazar's public revelations remain unclear. If his claims are accurate, his decision to violate security oaths and risk prosecution suggests either genuine concern for public welfare or personal grievances against former employers. If his claims are fabricated, the motivations could range from attention-seeking to more complex psychological factors. The broader implications of Lazar's claims continue to challenge conventional understanding of humanity's technological capabilities and our place in the universe. If accurate, his testimony suggests that human civilization has access to technologies that could revolutionize energy production, space travel, and our understanding of physics. If false, it demonstrates the power of compelling narratives to influence public perception of government activities and scientific possibilities. The investigation of Lazar's claims has revealed as much about the challenges of evaluating extraordinary assertions as about the specific technologies he described. The intersection of classified information, scientific speculation, and personal testimony creates an environment where definitive conclusions become nearly impossible to reach. Recent developments in government disclosure about UAP have raised new questions about the relationship between Lazar's claims and current official acknowledgments. The timing of increased government transparency about anomalous aerial phenomena, coming decades after Lazar's initial revelations, suggests either remarkable prescience on his part or careful observation of shifting official attitudes. The cultural impact of Lazar's testimony has created its own set of questions about how extraordinary claims influence public understanding of science and government. Secrecy. His story has shaped popular perceptions of Area 51, classified research programs, and the possibilities hidden within government facilities, regardless of its ultimate accuracy. The scientific community's evolving response to Lazar's technical claims reflects broader changes in how anomalous phenomena are evaluated. The shift from immediate dismissal to cautious analysis suggests recognition that extraordinary claims require extraordinary investigation rather than reflexive rejection. Perhaps the most profound question raised by Lazar's testimony concerns the nature of scientific progress and technological development. If his claims are accurate, they suggest that human technological capabilities might be far more advanced than publicly acknowledged. If false, they demonstrate the power of detailed technical narratives to create compelling illusions of impossible achievements. The legacy of Bob Lazar's claims extends beyond questions of their factual accuracy to broader issues of transparency, scientific inquiry, and public access to information about advanced research programs. Whether his story represents suppressed truth or elaborate fiction, it has fundamentally changed how we think about the boundaries between known and unknown technologies. As new evidence emerges and government attitudes toward UAP disclosure continue to evolve, the questions surrounding Bob Lazar's testimony remain as compelling and unresolved as they were when he first stepped into the shadows of that Las Vegas television studio more than 3 decades ago. In the quiet hours before dawn, when the Nevada desert holds its deepest secrets and the stars shine with crystalline clarity above the restricted mountains, the story of Bob Lazar continues to whisper through the darkness. More than 30 years have passed since a shadowy figure called Dennis first spoke of impossible technologies hidden beneath the desert floor. Yet the questions he raised remain as compelling and unanswered as they were in that first televised interview. We find ourselves in a strange place with this story. The man who claimed to have reverse-engineered flying saucers has been vindicated in some respects and challenged in others. Element 115 exists, though not as he described it. Government acknowledgement of extraordinary aerial phenomena has validated his technical descriptions while stopping short of confirming their source. The boundaries between science fiction and classified reality have blurred in ways that make his claims seem simultaneously more credible and more mysterious. Perhaps that's the most remarkable aspect of Bob Lazar's legacy, its ability to evolve with our understanding while maintaining its essential mystery. Each new scientific discovery, each government disclosure, each technological breakthrough adds new context to his testimony without definitively resolving its central questions. We remain suspended between belief and skepticism, between the known and the unknowable. The desert keeps its secrets as only the desert can. Those vast expanses of emptiness that stretch beyond every horizon continue to host activities that push the boundaries of human capability, whether through conventional aerospace engineering or something far more extraordinary. The lights that dance above remote installations in the small hours of the morning could represent the testing of the next generation of human aircraft. Or they could be something that challenges our understanding of what's possible. For the listeners who have followed this journey into the shadows of government secrecy and technological impossibility, the story offers no easy conclusions. Instead, it presents a puzzle that mirrors larger questions about truth, evidence, and the nature of reality itself. In a world where official secrecy and public speculation intersect in complex ways, how do we evaluate claims that challenge fundamental assumptions about what we think we know? Bob Lazar himself has largely retreated from public attention, running his scientific supply company and avoiding the spotlight that once threatened to destroy his life. He appears neither vindicated nor defeated by the decades of controversy his revelations created. Instead, he seems to exist in a state of quiet persistence, maintaining his story without dramatic elaboration, while the world slowly catches up to some of the concepts he introduced. The true measure of his impact may not be in the accuracy of his specific claims, but in the questions he forced into public consciousness. Before Lazar, Area 51 was a footnote in aerospace history. After his revelations, it became synonymous with the boundaries between acknowledged and hidden technological capabilities. He transformed public discourse about government secrecy from abstract concerns to specific questions about what might be concealed within classified programs. The scientific concepts he introduced gravity manipulation, exotic matter, advanced propulsion systems, have gained theoretical respectability, even as their practical implementation remains beyond current human capabilities. Whether through direct experience or remarkable intuition, Lazar helped introduce ideas that are now subjects of legitimate research rather than science fiction speculation. In our current moment, as government agencies acknowledge the reality of aerial phenomena with extraordinary capabilities, Lazar's testimony takes on new significance. The official admission that technologies beyond current understanding are operating in terrestrial airspace validates his central premise, while leaving questions about their origin carefully unresolved. This ambiguity may be the story's greatest strength. Rather than providing definitive answers about extraterrestrial contact or government cover-ups, Lazar's testimony opens space for wondering about possibilities that exist just beyond the edge of current knowledge. It invites speculation about what might be achievable with sufficient resources, advanced understanding, and willingness to push beyond conventional limitations. For those who believe his account, Lazar represents a rare glimpse behind the veil of ultimate secrecy, a witness to technologies that could transform human civilization if properly understood and applied. For skeptics, he embodies the dangers of accepting extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence, a cautionary tale about the intersection of human psychology and technological speculation. But perhaps the most honest response to Bob Lazar's story is neither complete belief nor total rejection, but rather an acknowledgement that reality often proves stranger than our assumptions about what's possible. In a universe where quantum mechanics describes the behavior of subatomic particles, where general relativity bends space and time, and where the vast majority of cosmic matter remains undetectable to our instruments, the impossible has a way of becoming merely improbable. The Nevada desert continues its silent watch over secrets both acknowledged and hidden. Test flights of advanced aircraft push the boundaries of what's officially possible, while unofficial speculations push the boundaries of imagination. In that space between the known and unknown, between the classified and the revealed, Bob Lazar's story maintains its peculiar power to challenge assumptions about technology, government, and our place in a universe that consistently proves larger and stranger than we expected. As you drift towards sleep, consider the questions that remain unanswered in this story. Not just the specifics of what Bob Lazar did or didn't experience in underground hangars decades ago, but the broader questions about what might be possible when human curiosity encounters technologies that challenge our understanding of physical reality. The stars that shine above the Nevada desert tonight are the same stars that have witnessed centuries of human technological progress. They've seen us progress from horse-drawn wagons to supersonic aircraft, from candlelight to nuclear power, from isolation to global communication. What they might witness in the decades to come, whether through the gradual advancement of acknowledged science or the revelation of currently hidden capabilities, remains one of the great open questions of our time. In the end, perhaps that's Bob Lazar's greatest contribution to our understanding. Not definitive answers about extraterrestrial technology, but enduring questions about the boundaries of the possible and the nature of the unknown. Sometimes the questions we can't answer teach us more than the answers we think we know. The desert wind whispers through the darkness, carrying secrets toward the horizon, where tomorrow's impossibilities wait to become today's realities. So there we have it, the story of Bob Lazar, the physicist who claimed to unlock the secrets of alien technology in the Nevada desert. Decades later, we still don't know if he's telling the truth, spinning an elaborate tale, or something in between. Element 115 exists now, though not as he described. The government acknowledges UFOs with impossible flight characteristics. Area 51 is no longer officially denied. Each revelation makes his story seem a little less impossible, or a little more carefully crafted. What do you think? Whistleblower or storyteller? Truth or fiction? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed tonight's journey into the unknown, there are more mysteries waiting for you in the playlist. Until next time, keep questioning what lies hidden in the shadows. Sweet dreams, and remember, Sometimes the most impossible stories turn out to be the most important ones.